Welcome to Being in Practice.
I'm Erin Davis. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a therapist.
I'm Dani Dwyer-Willingham. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm a quantum somatic coach. And we're a couple of queer, neurodivergent, multi-passionates here to get curious and unpack elements of collective and individual experiences through our intuitive, trauma-informed lenses.
We're both practitioners and people in our own constant discovery, here to provide education, entertainment, and an exploration on the practice of being, as messy and as multidimensional as it can be.
Let's be in practice together.
Welcome back to Being in Practice. I'm Erin Davis. I use they, them pronouns.
And I'm Dani. I use they, she pronouns.
And we are so excited to be recording this episode today, bringing it to you all because, as you well know, if you've been following our journey, that this is episode 13, which is the last episode of our first season.
Yeah!
I can't believe it.
We did this.
Woo!
High five.
High five. We did.
We have gone on a journey this season.
We have. I have loved every single one of our topics and all of our guests.
Mm-hmm.
And I so appreciate all of our listeners, all of you guys listening, because we have done super well in our listening ratings.
Engagement.
Yes. That's a better word.
At one point we had
so high.
We had on Apple Podcasts, they gave us an infinity symbol that our engagement had gone up so much so quickly that they said infinity%. And we were like,
so cool.
What? It was wild. We've had thousands of listeners, which is
all across the
world,
yep.
Which absolutely blows my mind that
I can't comprehend.
Started. We also have very like offline private practices. Like neither Erin and I have big social media presences.
Mm-hmm.
We and our Instagram for being in practice is small, and somehow people have found us and listened and tuned in on Apple and Spotify and Google and YouTube and Amazon and all of these places. And we are just so thrilled and so grateful. And I
celebrating.
One of the beautiful things about I think recording a podcast in general, but for me especially, this season has felt so special and so full of wisdom that I'm like, the fact that this now gets to just live on the internet for people to share for as long as they want is like really cool, really special.
It is cool. And it's cool that we have access to I love that I can go back and listen to all these beautiful conversations.
I listen to all of them.
Me too.
Not for ourselves, but for the wisdom of our guests.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're in flow, we come up with things that we couldn't have even imagined.
Yeah. And I do think even listening to us, for me, sometimes it's I don't remember every single thing I ever think or say, as none of us do, but it's been, it's really cool to have the ability to I'm really excited to go listen to grief again. That's going to be a really good one.
So really quickly, I'm going to pin back to what Erin just said, because I know they have a story to share. But just to encapsulate, this episode is on the topic of being, because we had to go meta with it. Being, that word is what brought Erin and I together, which is wild. Being in practice has been such an experience and a test and a challenge and a beautiful experiment in being, and what being in alignment and in integrity and in authenticity can be like, and what we can do and create when we're in that place, or when we're constantly in practice to be in that place. So we are going to take this episode far and wide around the topic and the practice and the experience of being in human bodies and just existing on this planet in this time. But pinning it back to grief really quickly, because grief was our previous episode. And while we were recording, I guess we got off, and I'll let Erin take it from here.
Yes. So we were recording the grief episode just the other day. And as we have our phones off during recording, my phone was down and off, so I didn't look at it. But after we got off that recording session, hung up, whatever, I had some missed calls from my brother, and that was weird because it was the middle of the day on a weekday, and that's not how we relate or connect with each other. And I had a voicemail from him that was telling me that my grandpa had gotten hit by a car, and that another voice. I think when I called him back, he said to call him immediately. So I called him, and he told me my grandpa was dead and had died from being hit by a drunk driver. He was walking across the street. It was really sad. And it was just so, I mean, I thought it was a lot of things. Just how like connected and what's the word? The synchronicity of that just felt really powerful. And it was just also really, yeah, I don't know. Like, I just think this is a good part of being is like sharing this experience, and also how like crazy is it that like we're talking about grief. Grief is still one of my favorite feelings. If you listen to the last episode, you know that that's something I've said a lot in this season. And I have been grieving. I'm not actively sad right in this moment, but I have been grieving over the last few days. And it was just so powerful. I don't know, like to be talking about the process of grieving and then to have the opportunity to grieve was just really, really interesting to me.
Like immediately. And that was happening during the hour and a half that we were speaking about grief.
Yeah, wild.
To be able to share for ourselves and with all of you. And then, I mean, I was so grateful we were together.
Me too.
You know, we had literally just had that processing support for you to be able to then receive that news, which is horrible and tragic.
Definitely.
And also be like,
but I had all the tools.
Totally.
From,
fresh on your mind.
Yeah.
Which I think is what a rare and powerful experience for sure.
And I'm the one going to, which I haven't yet, but I will be editing that episode as well. So it's going to be a nice refresher as, you know, the burial and memorial processes come up.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it was definitely an opportunity to be and to share with you all like a part of my being and experience lately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think to get back to like, to stay on, but like get back to maybe the being topic a little bit more. I think what I was going to ask you before I shared this story, which I'm glad I got to.
And also, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I hope that your family has all the healing and the support that they need. And
yeah, I guess, I feel like we do. And my dad was talking to me the other day that it seemed like even grandpa was kind of preparing, even though this was a freak accident. Like they had my dad said that they had recently had 2 conversations about what he wanted upon his death, more about like services and his body and things like that. All the will and all that's already taken care of, but just more detailed stuff. So really interesting how maybe sometimes we can sense that even when they are freak accidents. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there. But thank you. Yes, I think my dad was feeling pretty relatively good about being prepared for what to do now. So that's good. Which
I think, because we're talking about being, we also have to, I mean, death is a part of being. Death is a part of the life process. Definitely. And I think, as we've talked about many times, but also in my own work and in my own, like, the shift that I've experienced as a person who has lived through a lot of death. Like, I've had a lot of loved ones die. And I've been close to death a lot of my life. And I think that also preparing as a parent, I think preparing for death at any time in our lives, it's not obviously it's not a fun topic, but if you are listening to this and this is serving as a reminder to like get a will or think about what you would want for yourself, or think about if you have kids, you know, what you would want for them if you did leave prematurely and die, you know, leaving behind people that you love. I think that is, again, not a fun process, and also something that is really, that we are capable of connecting with people around. I think it's a really beautiful conversation I've been able to have with loved ones of like, if I die, here's what I want, and here's what I want you to know, and here's what I want you to like remember about me, and here's how I would want this process to go. And honestly, it's been a really, really challenging and really beautiful connection process of, as I've become not more comfortable with death, but have integrated the reality of death into my life and into my understanding and comprehension of existence, that it is something that is important to plan for, that is important to talk about, and is important, as you said, like gives the grace and the benefit to our loved ones if we were to pass, that we're not leaving this burden on them, that we are able to process through those things and plan for those things in life. And I think the service of like being a death doula is really beautiful. And I think that if anyone has access and the privilege to access those resources, like that's really beautiful. If you're experiencing someone who's moving towards the death process or in transition or, you know, in hospice or anything like that, death doulas are an incredibly supportive resource for that. So
I've heard this.
And actually I know a couple of really incredible death doulas. We can list them on our website. One of them being Aloha Arthur, who I had the privilege of knowing in Los Angeles. And gosh, she is just incredible. So we'll share their work because I think for some reason this is coming through. Whoever needs to hear this, I hope that it's supportive for you.
Definitely.
So a little bit of a tandent there, but
yeah, it's part of being though.
But it
is a really important part of being that we don't talk about very much. And even I mean, we did the grief episode and death was definitely a part of that, but here we are talking about it again. So
here we are. It was meant to come through for another reason.
It was definitely meant to come through.
Yeah. I think part of this episode, we were talking about like, what do we want to say in this final being episode? And we were just so trusting that whatever would need to come through would. And I think we're already experiencing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was curious if we want to switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to ask you, I wanted us to talk about, and specifically I'll ask you and you can ask me if you want, why being is so important to you. It's a part of your like business name. It's obviously part of our cumulative business name. And as you referenced earlier, it's part of our podcast name because it's in both of our
practice names.
And practice names. Yes, all that stuff. So I guess maybe that's where we could go, because we could go a lot of places, but I want to hear that.
So the question was, why is being so important to me?
Yeah, what does it mean to you? Why is it important to you? Why is it a part of your practice name?
So I think this is kind of like even tagging back to just as I've learned more about death and life and being, the process of existence and the nature of being a human, my life struggles. I have had so many privileges and also have dealt with so much trauma and so much loss and so much mental illness and so much physical disability and injury and just all sorts of my life experience this time around on the planet has been so multifaceted. And I have also come to a place now where I feel like in my mid-30s, as a parent, as a divorced person, as a queer person, as so many other like intersecting identities come together to be who I am, I think there is possibility in being. And I think that being is intrinsically, to me, speaks to the sporadic nature of existence, which is like everything is cyclical, life and death and compost and life and death and compost. And we experience that over and over again in our lives at micro levels, at macro levels.
Definitely.
And the place that I'm at in my life now, I only believe is possible because I have been open to being here. And I have moved through so many places and episodes of depression and all of these different things that like made me really not want to be on this planet or be in a body or be alive. And giving myself the chance to continue to experience life, to continue to experience being, is why it feels so important to me. Because I believe that in being, like I just said, like in being, there is possibility and anything can change. Everything will change, but also anything can change. I'm like, if I can go from where I was to where I am and where I get to continue going, regardless of the hardships that continue to be a part of life, I want to be here now. And I have come to this place where I know my purpose, which I think is a rare thing to be able to say. I know my purpose is, I should say, I believe that I have multiple and I'm living many of them and I will continue to grow into some of them.
Sure, of course.
But like part of my purpose is helping others realize the possibility of being, realize their own capabilities of being, regardless of what their bodies are capable of, or their minds are capable of, or their external realities influence in their lives. What is possible for you in your being, in this life? What is possible? What do you want to feel? What do you want to create? How do you want to do this life?
I feel like that's so perfectly your business name.
That's
too.
what,
like you're defining both of the words in your business so well.
So my practice name is Prismatic Being, and it is integrated somatics, energy work, and coaching. And for me, it's like this, it's like examining and then getting to play with the multifaceted experience of being a human.
Definitely.
And honing in on things and extrapolating things and clearing things and expanding things through embodiment and through the practice of like really getting to know ourselves. And I know we talked about before we started recording self-discovery, self-development, personal development, all of these things. Like, I think they've both been very hijacked by like the wellness industrial complex. And also there is such importance in it. And it is going to be such an individual experience for everyone. There is no way to do this life. There is no way to find out who you are. There is no way to become who you want to be. There are so many ways. And I think
definitely
we are also multidimensional. And that's where the prismatic element comes in, because we are so many parts and pieces and fragments and varieties of being, like in one little body.
It's
true. Wild.
It is wild.
And then we all interact with each other, and it creates more prisms, and it creates more refractions, and more just the dynamicism of being human is wild. And I have fallen in love with it now. Thankfully, I'm so grateful to say I love being alive at this moment in my life. And I truly seek to support others in learning. If you can't fall in love with being alive, how do you do this in the ways that feel best for you? And how are you capable of being in the ways that you want to be, that like truly make you want to be here?
I love it. And I think that links well with what we've done in the podcast this season, in that I think we're obviously we've talked about a lot of different topics. We have presented a lot of our ideas and our guests' ideas about these topics, which are being topics: sex, religion, grief, stress and burnout, all the things. But I think, we are presenting our perspectives, but I do think we have done a good job of ensuring that our audience, and we talk about how there isn't one way. I mean, you already said it about there isn't one way to do this to get to where, we all would like to go, which is to be in love with life, maybe, or to be okay with living. There isn't one way to get there.
Yeah.
And I think we do a good job of that, even though we're sharing from these very, small perspectives.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of us for that. And and that's our podcast name, being, like we said, it's linked, being in practice. It took us a while to figure out that name. Not too long, but I really think it's perfect.
It came to me like I woke up in a cold sweat and I was like,
oh, that's right.
It happened, being in practice, because we are in practice as humans. Both of our practices are being.
And
it was just like this perfect culmination. So now that I went on my spiel, same question back to you.
Okay.
What is being to you, and why is it important to you?
I think being is a really important word that, how do I put it? It's a really important word that I don't know if it gets enough credit or attention, or at least in my life or in the lives of the people I surround myself with. Not that it's absent, but like this idea of intentionally living in presence. I think that word presence comes to mind when I think about the word being, and incorporating that into my practice was really important because, well, there's a lot of like logical, very like concrete reasons. Like I work with human beings. And also I really like alliteration, and my practice's name is Better Being. So that's fun. But on another note, I think, yeah, like how can I as a practitioner, as a therapist who loves what I do, how can I communicate in my business name what I believe about existence and what's important about living and being in existence, which is that, I don't know, it's like really cheesy, but I think there's a propensity in all of us that have grown up, especially in capitalism, to produce and do, produce and do, produce and do. And it's just, what are you doing with your life? What do you do? Like, what is the first thing you ask someone when you meet them?
Not me.
I know, but like, what's the first thing you're asked when you meet someone new? You know what I mean? And I do it too, but it's just, that's how ingrained it is. We don't even think about why we're asking someone what it is they do.
Actually, that was the first question we asked each other, which is why we connected immediately.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with the question.
Yeah.
I actually do really like to know that about people, because it communicates, there's learning in that about someone. But yeah, it's, anyway, going back, I just, we're beings and we're not doings. It's a big one. And I'm just so passionate about helping my clients get to a point where they are living, well, like reaching their goals, but that ideally also we're working on presence and not doing what are all the things I can do to produce, and how is that harming them, and let's look at all of it. And I think, yeah, I don't know, I really like that being is the focus of what I do. And I think here too, in the podcast, like our name even implies, and what I really like about this name, Being in Practice, is that it also shows us that being is a practice, and that's because of conditioning, which is, it is what it is. That's fine. We're conditioned to be producers, to be doers, to, we're not conditioned to be present and experience and feel our feelings and be aware of how our bodies are reacting to, that's not our conditioning. That's, our parents weren't, most of our parents
Broad
don't know this stuff. Yeah. Most of our parents weren't somatic coaches and taught us and conditioned us in this way. And even if some of us did, there's still also the alternative conditioning. If you went to any school at all, grew up watching anything on TV, you will be a doer.
We're influenced, yes.
I think too, that's like a part of my practice. It's a part of what we're doing here, but just that, yeah, this takes effort. This takes remembering, it takes practice to be, which is funny because we are human beings. But
I think that's one of the more interesting things, is that I think we're lied to a lot. I mean, of course, we're lied to a lot in this, especially in Western society. We were talking about this. Lied to as in, like, if you do the things right, you'll be happy. Or if you, like, have the right job, or marry the right person, or have the kids, or have the house. These are elements of having things that I will say for myself, and I was taught, if I followed this path, I would live a good life. I would be happy in my life. That was not the case for me. And I think that a lot of capitalism and a lot of patriarchy, the goals of those things are to keep people on certain tracks so that we are not questioning our existence, right? So that we're just following the leader, essentially. I just said essentially very strangely, but we're going to keep going.
Okay.
Essentially.
Oh, okay.
Clearly something else wanted to come through. But I think that the questioning, and this is the practice, is like, is this true for us? For some people, that life works, potentially. I do feel like the systemic oppression that we live under truly harms everyone and doesn't serve anyone, and that lots of things need to change for all of us to be able to like both live our truths and have access to resources and have equality and equanimity and true liberation and collective justice and all of the things. There's so many things that have to change to be able to get there. And we can start at the micro level and at the individual level as best we can wherever we are. But even just doing that, this practice of being, of even thinking like, what is conditioning? How do I decondition? How do I experience personal liberation? How do I influence collective liberation? How do I kind of, as we've said, like, how do I better my being? Like, that's your whole thing, right? Is like, how do I experience presence? How do I clear the trauma that's living in my body? How do I participate in intergenerational healing? These are big questions, and they are not intrinsically taught for us. Like, we are not typically taught to do that as individuals in this society. And also why I think it's so important for people to understand that like this is an extensive process and we absolutely need support in doing it. We cannot do this alone.
Yeah. As always.
As always.
I think what's coming up as I'm listening to you and the being topic is that I watched, so I love my spiritual like TikToks and my spiritual Instagrams, or whatever, I'm going to call them spiritual. There's one that has come up a few times with the last couple of weeks that I don't know who's talking. I would have to look it up, but some person's talking, some wise person's talking, saying that maybe, it's the creator of Midnight Gospel, that show, if anyone is listening.
I'm unfamiliar.
Well, he's great. He also has a podcast. Also highly recommend that show if you haven't seen it. It's wild. Anyway, he's talking about how maybe you don't have to grow. Maybe you don't have to change. Maybe you're exactly enough and perfect right now, and not just your good parts, but all your parts. And I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but I think also part of what I like about the word being is how, as this implication, how radical is it to not have to, I mean, maybe a doing is healing for some of us some of the time. Maybe a doing is yeah, well, yeah, or like I love our name, and again, it is a practice, and we do have to unlearn things in order to be a better being, be better at being, all of that. But I also, like, there is also I guess it's a paradoxical thought that, like, also maybe we're okay exactly as we are right now. And that's anti-capitalistic.
Yes.
That's anti-patriarchy, anti-race, like, it's all of it. It's anti-racist. It's everything. And it is a radical act when we are just being, when we are just existing. When we accept ourselves fully in all the shades that we are right now, even if things could, quote unquote, be better, or we could be more healed, or we could be less traumatized, or whatever.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank.
I think that's
more authentic. I don't know.
That's part of the integration process, is like the true acceptance of oneself and the true understanding. We've talked about this, especially in our shame and worthiness episode, around understanding that as we are whole. As we are enough.
Yes.
There might be parts of our behavior and how we show up that aren't serving us anymore that might, we might want to change. That is always going to be an individual choice. We always, whether we perceive ourselves as having choice or not, there is always choice in how we are able to just influence. Felicia,
I was just going to say we're just doing a recap.
In our burnout and codependency episode, Felicia talked so much about, like, sometimes if your life is so overwhelming and if this all feels like so much, and if you truly are just working on, like, how do I accept where I'm at in this moment? Sometimes all you have is the place that you're sitting. Sometimes all you have is your connection to the support that your body literally has in this moment. And sometimes all you can do is feel that, or take a breath, or
step outside,
or
half a second,
or hug yourself if that's, accessible to you, or like whatever it is. Sometimes that's all we have.
Mm-hmm.
And that in and of itself is a radical act, is accepting that regardless of external influences, and sometimes the lives that we live through can be so unfair, and they can be so hard, and they can be so
mm-hmm.
traumatic and so oppressive. And whether that's been your lived experience or not, taking the moment for that micro reflection or that micro connection of yourself is a choice to be and to be outside of systemic influence in that one tiny moment. Mm-hmm. And if that is all you can do, and if that is the only place you can start in learning, or in not even in learning, but just in the practice of being, that is enough. And you are absolutely enough. I truly believe that everyone, whether you feel this or experience this or not, we are all whole. We are all worthy. We are all enough. We are all beings.
Mm-hmm. Which is why we're worthy.
Which is life is magical. The fact that we're all here on a rock, floating in space, in a galaxy that is infinite, is fucking wild.
That is wild. It is wild that all of that exists and we're here conscious of it.
And
some of it. As much as we can be. I mean, I don't know how much I can grasp that all, but...
And I think that it is idealistic, and I am guilty of idealism at times. I think it's idealistic to be like, everyone can do this work, and everyone can be the best versions of themselves, and everyone, like, it might sound ridiculous that we're saying like everyone is whole and everyone is enough. And also, again, like Felicia said this as well, we get to choose in this life whether we are like, because life means nothing, we get to choose to give it meaning. And in her words, she was like, you can choose hedonism and like nothing matters, and I'm going to be individualist, and I'm going to just do the things that are good for me, or like numb the things, or do the things, and like you can totally live that life. And there's like no judgment on that, because that is one way of being. That is a part of how people live in this world.
Definitely.
Or you can choose to put meaning in everything, and in doing that, experience love and connection and generosity and pain and grief and sadness and loss and risk and fulfillment. And you can choose to experience and to lean into all of what life holds, which is sometimes really devastating, and also sometimes really beautiful. And if that hasn't been possible for you yet, I would just invite everyone in this moment. I think we talk about this a lot. We're typically not taught how to access our intuitions. We're typically not taught to believe what our bodies are telling us. And I believe in the power of collective thought. And I think that right now, if we all just took a moment to like, if it's possible for you, sit in stillness for just a moment, as long as you can, if it's a microsecond, or if it's a few moments, or if it's a few breaths or whatever, and truly check in and say, do I feel whole? Do I feel enough? How do I feel? What am I feeling in this moment? And I think just doing that is being. That is putting all of this into practice. This is understanding that the choices we make, or the choices that are possible for us in every moment, like, I'm just going to sit here and see how I feel and make that choice to like lean into what my body and what my higher perspective is telling me or offering me in this moment. I think that's a really beautiful, radical, anti-capitalist, anti-patriarchy, anti-oppression thing we can all choose to do.
Yes.
Even if it's just right now.
And if your answers are no to any of those questions, like, no, I don't feel worthy, no, I don't. I feel bad in my body. I think we did a good job of addressing some options or perspectives on that in our shame episode.
Yes.
On
tag back to shame.
When we don't feel enough. When we feel as though we are bad. That it's just we're not changing that, we're not working against that, we're not stuffing that away, we're not rejecting it. That's a form of attachment, and it will spiral us. So noticing that it's there, accepting it's there, and working towards regulation. Which can happen in those moments too.
Yeah.
Recognizing we don't feel enough, and saying, it's okay that I don't feel enough, can be a radical regulating self-statement thought experience.
Yes.
And like I already said, but regulating in and of itself.
The validation of just exactly where you're at is where you're at. And if you need to just hear that where you're at is enough and where you're at is okay, and it's okay if you want to change things, and it's okay if those don't feel possible right now.
I think something that I go back to so much in my own life with this is I've cultivated I've had the privilege and experience of being able to cultivate this radical, wild trust in the goodness of the universe. I'm going to put it that way. There's not great language for what I'm trying to describe, but that's the best I could say. And that this trust in the goodness of the universe, and by goodness I mean deep, transforming loveness of the universe, that whatever I'm experiencing at any point in time is for the best possible outcome in my life. I think it is actually an Abraham Hicks quote that I have. It's part of my cultivation process. She says, "Everything is always working out for me, no matter how it appears at any given point in time." And whether or not that's true for every person, I can't say. But if we get to choose how we view things, if we are magical co-creators of our realities in the universe, then why can't it be true if I choose to believe that that's how life goes? And I think it is a helpful point for me, coming back to the being, to allow, it just creates a little bit more space. The more I can trust that and cultivate that in my belief system, it creates just a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. It adds up. The space adds up to where this quote unquote terrible experience from an outside looking in maybe is actually just okay. This is a season. This is how it feels right now. This won't last forever. This is for my ultimate ideal reality that I'm trying to create. There's nothing that can happen to me that is getting in the way of what is everything I want or desire. Yeah, I have another really cool video that I would like to reference, but I feel like you have things to say before I go there.
I mean, it's bringing up a few things for me. One of which is, this isn't antithesis to anything you're saying, because I do believe the same things. And I also remember, I'm laughing now because I can laugh about it. I remember when my depression, so I have clinical depression. Not anymore. Y'all, not anymore.
Ditto.
I'm diagnosed with clinical depression.
Ditto.
And I'm no longer on meds or anything like that for it.
Yes.
But I loved meds, and they gave me back my life.
Definitely.
Anyways, listen to your doctors, folks. But what I was going to say is, when I had my first massive depressive episode, I had been a person in my late teens, early 20s who loved the saying, happiness is a choice.
Oh gosh.
I loved that saying, y'all.
That's a hard one.
I was like, well, happiness is a choice and we can just choose to be happy. Meanwhile, I was doing massive amounts of drugs and substance abuse and all sorts of self-harming behavior and truly like unhappy. And I was just walking around being like, happiness is a choice. Ta-da! And I remember experiencing my first clinical depressive episode, and my first, not my first, but like the more clear moments of suicidality, and thinking like, well, I can just choose to be happy right now. Why am I not choosing to be happy right now? Why does life feel like I don't want to do this anymore if I can just choose to be happy? Because like none of this should be happening if I should be able to just choose my own happiness. And I was totally invalidating my experience of chemical imbalances and the things that had influenced me getting to that point. Just being like, well, I should still, like, literally even in those moments, I was still like, well, I should just be able to choose to be happy.
Well, I think this is the, I think I know what you're getting at here and what you're saying. And that is really funny. Now back. But I think maybe a part of you was trying, I mean, you tell me, but it sounds like a part of you was trying to maybe make sense and or create the reality that you wanted, and or maybe even you had some sort of unconscious or conscious belief that, like, right, it's in the realm of what I'm saying. I think that's what you're saying, like, right, that we create our we have some power sometimes, or maybe a lot of the time, depending on how you feel about it, to create our own reality through perception, because the only thing that's real is how I'm perceiving the experiences I'm having at any given point in time. And so part of you maybe knew that and was trying to say, it was like a simplistic language for like this deeper, bigger, more complex thing that maybe you can't choose to be happy. Maybe none of us can. Probably that's not a great phrase. But maybe we have influence and choice over accepting our realities, which is a regulating, right? You just said I was invalidating my experience. What does invalidation do? We talked about this all through shame. It's harming us.
Absolutely.
Invalidation keeps us stuck.
It's dysregulating.
It keeps the feelings, the bad feelings, the whatever we're trying to control and make better inside of our bodies.
Yep.
And it's poison.
Yep.
So you were invalidating your experience through the misplaced belief that happiness is a choice, and by saying that over and over again to yourself. So a better version of that would be maybe what we're saying now, or the idea that my reality sucks. This is uncomfortable. I am not happy. I am struggling. That's the validating thought we can all, the practice we just did.
And I think, yes. And I think the interesting thing is now I'm able to have the perspective. I mean, how long ago was that? I'm about 10 years removed from that now. And I haven't had a depressive episode since I made the choices that I've made to, like, I blew up my life in the most caring and thoughtful way possible. But, you know, through therapy and through whatever, went through separation, divorce with a young child, did all the things, changed my life, stepped into my queerness, embraced who I am, embraced my healing desire, like the call that I feel to like use what I have experienced and use the tools that I've learned over the last 10 years to support others. In doing that, like I have not had those things anymore. So for me looking back, I'm like, of course I was in a depressive episode. I was making choices that were literally antithesis to what
your authentic being
truly knew in my core, but wasn't giving voice to, that I was supposed to be doing. Every step I took outside of alignment led me to the depression and the anxiety and all of the other mental illness that I was experiencing. And that is not to say that mental illness comes from us choosing not to be who we are. Absolutely not. From my experience now, I do believe it was heavily influenced by the choices. It wasn't not I had severe trauma and I am diagnosed with complex PTSD, and I have all of these things that like were actively influencing that. And also I now know myself well enough, and I have now experienced enough depressive episodes and enough like mental health things, mental illness is, to understand that what that feels like now when I make a choice that doesn't feel in alignment with myself, and I get like a flare up, or I get like a ping or a stomach ache or a headache or whatever, I now listen to that soon, and I evaluate what choice that I made or what choices I am making that I can renegotiate. And often, very, very quickly, I am asymptomatic. Again, that is my experience. That is what I am capable of now.
I have similar ones. I agree.
And like, for me, that has changed the way that I perceive what my life experience has been like.
I would also add in here, okay, well, I have two things. A, that was a little like authenticity episode, like kickback, which we're just hitting all, like we're not hitting all of them, but we are hitting a lot of them, which is cool, in this little last episode. The second thing though, what was I going to say? Something, maybe also your past self. So, right, we're talking about this, you know, this new perspective you have, you're more aligned, this keeps you more regulated. It also keeps you healthy to be more aligned. And when you can notice you're out of alignment through all these symptoms that you've trained yourself to like pick up on.
Notice, yeah.
I think little you, or younger you, 10 years ago you, not little, but younger you, I don't know, there's something about, and I was just talking to clients about this like just really recently, this idea I think that a lot of us have that I think is a conditioned ideal and also an immature one, as most conditioned things are immature, I think, that happiness is the goal. Because also an aspect of happiness is a choice, and I'm not happy, like, and eventually you realize that and all the things, but like that implies that happiness is a goal, right? Like if you're saying to yourself, you're cultivating this self-belief.
Yep.
You're trying to create this reality where happiness is the goal because happiness is a choice, implying that we should be choosing happiness. The thing with happiness is it has nothing to do with regulation or self-validation or acceptance or anything that brings true peace and joy, like the things that are actual lasting positive body and mental regulating experiences.
Emotions. I think absolutely. I think people misconstrue happiness as joy. Happiness is a fleeting emotional experience, and emotions take 60 seconds to pass through our bodies
when felt
completely. Yes. So happiness is an emotion. Joy is like an experience. Joy is a cultivated experience. And I think this ties back to the grief episode where we talk so much about emotions being a spectrum, or experiences are a spectrum. And when we have more access to joy, we have more access to grief. When we have more access to grief, we have more access to presence. All of these things are interconnected, right? Happiness is one of those things that I think people misconstrue as the goal, when to me, I'm like, and this is what I support others in doing, is like safe access to processing emotions is the goal. Safe access to regulating emotions and behaviors and all of those things, that to me is like, if we're going to put goals on things, that's a more attainable one than happiness.
Exactly,
that's for sure.
What I was going to say.
Because we can skills build for that, right?
I mean, this is a little bit hyperbolic, but I can always, that's the hyperbolic part. I feel pretty confident that almost always I can figure out and or use a skill, talk to a therapist, whatever I need to get to a regulated space.
And this is,
I have far less control, and sometimes we do, but I have far less control if I'm going to have the emotion of happiness.
Absolutely.
I can't teach my clients skills to build to happiness. I can teach my clients and help my clients with skills, thought processes, reframes that get us to regulated, calm nervous systems.
Emotional states, yeah.
And that's what I was going to say too about going back to your experience, right, when you're trying to choose happiness and then you're actually just deeply depressed because you weren't being authentic and therefore couldn't access access regulation because you weren't doing regulating things because you were going against yourself.
And I didn't have the awareness of the tools.
Also that.
Yeah.
That's kind of it's this Chinese parable it's a little video that I really like, but it's actually, you could also just read the parable. I'd have to go back. It's like the parable of the farmer. And the video I really like is this little cartoon of a farmer's living in this village, and like his son, a horse runs away, and the villagers come up and they're like, "Oh no, your horse ran away. That's such terrible news." And he's like, "Maybe so." Then the next day, the horse comes back with like a whole herd of wild horses to his farm. And then the villagers come in and they say, "Oh my gosh, what good fortune, all these horses." And he's like, "Maybe so." And then the next day, his son was like riding one of the new wild horses to train it and fell off and broke his legs. And the villagers come and they're like, "Oh no, that's so terrible." And he's like, "Maybe so." And then the next day, the army comes and they can't take his son to recruitment because his leg is broken. And the villagers are like, "What luck?" And he says, and it just keeps going like that. It's just this like idea that like the farmer could have had all these reactions to all of these events that we could easily label as, the villagers were labeling as bad and good. Right? That's how terrible, how lucky, how terrible, how like, we don't know. And this is what I'm talking about. That farmer, I would say, you can extrapolate a lot of beautiful things from this beautiful parable. But that farmer, I would argue, had figured out acceptance and self-regulate. Like, he was not getting all, I mean, I'm really kind of extrapolating here, but it's this idea of cultivating regulation. We don't know if we can access acceptance, that self-validation, trusting that like, we don't know it all. And I like, however you want to get there, this idea that like, I can access regulation. I'm not looking for happiness. Because if that farmer was looking for happiness, all those quote unquote bad events would have been upsetting. That is, these are not happy circumstances.
Yeah.
We can agree with that. Does he have to be dysregulated through them? Well, that's up to his ability to know skills, have skills, use skills.
And I think this is important because as we're kind of nearing the end of the episode, like dysregulation will happen. Yes. Activation will happen. Falling in love is a dysregulating, activating experience. Like seriously. Yeah. So things that we perceive as like quote unquote positive are still actually dysregulating our nervous systems and jangling our chemicals
off
around.
Baseline.
They are off baseline. Absolutely. So I think understanding the awareness and also like learning the skills. And this is why I love somatics so much, is because kind of like tying it back to what we were saying earlier, like literally if we're experiencing activation or dysregulation and all we have is the moment that we have and like the connection to ourselves, having somatic tools like tapping, and I mean, this is like such a dilution of what somatics encompasses, but I think in my training, I learned something like 47 different somatic tools, right? Cool. That I can then teach other people to do. And I now have for myself of whatever the experience is, whether it's I'm falling in love or I got good news or I'm, having a really hard day or like just went through like a massive move or experiencing whatever it is, I can reach into my toolbox, and sometimes I'm not the greatest at doing it for myself. But the fact that these things are accessible for us most of the time, if we learn them, because again, if all we have is the moment that we're like it right now, which is true, because all we have is the moment that we're experiencing right now, whether that's scary or exciting or whatever, there is usually a choice that we can make to tap into ourselves, to increase regulation in our systems, or honor the dysregulation. I think this is something that's been coming up in my brain a lot as I've been listening to you, is that like anger is also such a part of being that I think is invalidated or condemned. And sometimes if we're having the life experience, like I remember going through, having moments of like having my anger held safely by a therapist or by, a safe processor, and being like, oh my God, this feels so good. Because anger is also like, shit happens. Life is hard. Can be really, really horrifying sometimes. And we deserve to feel our anger.
Yeah.
And it is a part of being. And sometimes that anger can last a really long time. And that is okay. And if you are in like a place where you just feel angry at everything, that is okay.
Definitely.
And we can also honor that anger or honor whatever it is that your experience is, while also understanding that one step towards regulation is possible. One step towards safely holding your experience is possible. One step towards validation and truly, like we've talked about, being enough in that moment because you are, whatever that feels like to you, like that is possible. Mm-hmm. Just because we are here, that is possible. Whatever that is for you.
I was just thinking this really cool thought.
Okay.
That I just made a realization. You're obviously a somatic person. Obviously. We've been talking about it forever, and I've known you since February. And I've been kind of like, you're like, yeah, we can do this in the body. I'm like, I'm not a somatic. Like, I'm not like, I believe in somatic. Like, I try to use them, all the things. But I just had this realization because I was thinking while you were just talking, and after my little, parable sharing, I was like, oh, like trying to aim for happiness could be even a dysregulating experience. So we can reframe. In my head, I was like, we can reframe, again, kind of going back to the shame episode, but we can reframe and say, no, my desire is for regulation, or what, maybe that's a better
whatever
aim.
It is, or maybe my desire is to feel my anger or whatever.
Yeah. But all those things are, in the end, like allowing anger, feeling anger, that is an act of validation, which will inevitably be regulating. Maybe not instantly, but at some point that has to be the outcome if that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting because my realization was like, you're very body focused. And what I do with my clients is a lot of, I don't only do this, but I love, like, how can we think about this? How can we change your mind so that everything else gets in tune?
Yeah. And that's where the whole system coaching part of what I do comes in too, because we're doing mindset work. We're doing heart work. We're doing energy work. We're doing literally physical work, as in like, how do you move through your day? What's your budget like? All of these different things. And we're also working on, how does my body feel? How do I feel what's in my body? How do I move what's in my body through my body? Like, so I think it's like such a cool, I think we can't disconnect.
No.
Like, I think therapy is so important because I think that learning to understand our minds and how our brains work is, like, again, counter to our conditioning, counter to what society
Definitely
tells us, quote unquote, we should be, or how we should move through the world. And I also think that this is where the interconnected systems of being mind, heart, body, energy, physical reality, emotional experience, these all come together, and like that, I mean, that's like big.
It's so cool. That's what I'm literally just thinking. Like, you're like, this is how we can regulate our bodies. Tapping, you said it was watered down, but like all the things, all those skills you learned. Here's how to regulate
like
the body.
Emotional processing and all of the things.
And then I'm over here in my head, I'm like, and then how do we not keep dysregulation from ever occurring again? That's not
possible.
But how is your thought process not helping with keeping your system as regulated as possible?
Yeah.
Which is just so cool. We're just the perfect pair. It's so cool.
I mean, and I've said this before in other episodes, but I won't work with clients with specific types of trauma histories unless they're also working with a therapist, because I'm not a clinical practitioner. I'm not a licensed professional, a mental health care professional. So I think having that kind of stability, even for people that I work with, to like be able to integrate with their therapists, because we're doing we're doing all sorts of different kinds of extrapolation and work, and for that to be able to like be condensed into an integrated experience, I like love working with therapy counterparts, because again, if this is accessible for you, I'm like, that's what I always want. If I could have a somatic coach and a therapist at all times, I would be such a happy camper, because to me, it is like, I both need the safe space for mental, verbal, and emotional processing. And I also want the accountability and the structure and the skills and the tools building and the like, all of the things all together all at once, all the time. I'm like, give it to me.
I love it. No, I would, yeah. I mean, that's why I work with, I mean, I'd love for clients to, I've sent some people your way. And also the idea of, like plant medicine stuff that I work with, it's like, that's like my access to like my specialty of like, how can we get you in a biophysical way into a different mindset, into your body more, whatever it is. And then I'll work with you on integrating. But also like, what you're talking about,
because we're doing
practitioners to integrate that. I love all the integration.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Love that word, integration.
Maybe we'll incorporate it into next season. Although also PS, we should do an Anchor episode.
Absolutely. I think we've
got
a running list of what's to come.
We do. Oh my gosh.
So y'all, here we are.
I'm so pumped.
I think this episode was exactly what we thought it would be, and also nothing that we thought it would be.
I agree with that.
Yep. It was very broad and also very specific, very personal and also very collective.
And kind of summarizing the season a little bit.
Because here we are, being in practice as per usual. Y'all, we cannot thank you enough for being here. And in the meantime, when we are not airing our weekly episodes, you can always email us at beinginpracticepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at beinginpracticepodcast. You can find our website, www.beinginpracticepodcast.com.
Didn't you already say that?
No, I said our Gmail.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Basically, it's Being in Practice Podcast.
Just
everywhere.
Google that.
And, it would mean so much to Erin and I if y'all continue to like and share and support, and review. And if this is beneficial,
subscribe.
If it has been supportive for you in any way or provided resources that you value, please share it with people who you feel like it would also resonate with. And we are truly so honored to have been able to share this experience with all of you and with each other. This has been life-changing.
It has.
Yeah.
We're on a path. And although we don't have current details of season 2 as far as release dates or things like that, if you do subscribe, definitely follow us on Instagram. That's where updates on I'm sure once we get season 2 rolling and have more details, that's where we're going to be posting.
Yep.
Like mad.
You'll have heard it there first.
Yeah. So subscribe, stay with us. We're going to have some new things in season 2. Well, besides topics, I think we're going to have some new things that we're going to be doing, hopefully be in a new space. Lots of newness to come, I am hoping for. So we do appreciate you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next season.
And just wishing you all so much goodness and just the full range of life experience, that it may be supportive for your highest good. And find us if you like, and just wrapping you all in love and peace and safety and all of the joy of being.
Regulation.
Cool.
Thanks,
you
guys.
all. We love you.
Love you guys.
Okay. Thanks for being in practice with us. Bye.
Bye.